Welcome everyone to Alon Shvut and to the second parak of Masechet Nazir. The Mishnah says, Hareini Nazir min agrogros. Grogros are dried figs, and there's no such thing as Nazirus with regard to dried figs. Uminad vela, and these are dried dates that they used to smash. You may remember this from Elam Mitzias from your youth. Igulei Dvela, whether it's a Davar Sheyesh Lo Siman. And he accepted upon himself Nazirus from dates, or in the first case, figs. And the Mishnah records the Shita of Beit Shammai first, and then of Beis Hillel. Beit Shammai Omrim Nazir. Now, there are two ways of understanding Beit Shammai even before we get to the Sugya. One way is understanding Beit Shammai is that what he meant to say was, in addition to classic Nazirus, which means I'm not allowed to drink wine, for example, I want to enjoin myself from eating figs and dates. That's one way of understanding. The other way of understanding Beit Shammai is that we stop in the middle of his sentence. We stop him after he says, Hareini Nazir. Stop. You may remember, if you're old enough, telegrams. Anybody remember what that word means? So when you wrote a telegram in the old days, you used to say this, and then stop. You know, that was the way they didn't have periods on the telegram. So Beit Shammai says, Hareini Nazir, stop. And then min agrogros. And we have to figure out exactly what he means by min agrogros, but we apply the principle called tfos lashon rishon, and we accept where the person says at the beginning of his statement, even if he contradicts himself at the end of the statement. So again, just to summarize, I don't know if Beit Shammai is saying, well, he meant to say I'm a Nazir from Yayin, etc., plus from Grogos and Tvela. Or maybe Beit Shammai is saying that we don't at all, we're not gores, his words, we're not grogros. We just put all the emphasis on Tfos Lashon Rishon, on the ratio when he says Hareini Nazir. Beis Hillel remaining Nazir. This is not Nazirus. If a person says Hareini Nazir, he means to accept upon himself all the dinim of Nazirus. But here, he tells you exactly what he had in mind. Let's not fool ourselves. He said that he wants to accept upon himself Nazirus from Grogos and Dvela. Well, you can't say that he accepted upon himself the dinim of Nazirus. And now we have to add a point of Tosfos. Tosfos adds the following comment on Beis Hillel. Eino Nazir doesn't just mean that there's no chalos Nazirus, but not only that, there's not even a chalos neder, which would mean that if we took the word Nazir and interpreted it as a neder, then he would be saying, I'm accepting upon myself a neder from Grogos and Tvela. So Tosfos points out that according to Beis Hillel, it's neither Nazirus nor is it neder, and nothing is chal. It doesn't register at all. Now, there's a little bit of a problem here with Beis Hillel, and that's because we have a shita of Rabbi Meir that we're going to learn about based on Erechid called Eino de Motzi Tfarav B'Tela Mipiv, which means a person doesn't just say things that are meaningless, and therefore we have to come up with some meaning to his words. Either, as Beit Shammai would go and say, well, he's a Nazir, or at least grant that there's a neder vis-a-vis Grogos and Tvela. But no, there's nothing. Nothing registers. And in effect, basically, it comes out, according to Beis Hillel, it's Dvarim B'Telim. Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Yehuda wants to reinterpret Beit Shammai. It can't be that according to Beit Shammai, he's accepting upon himself Nazirus. How could you say such a thing? He didn't stop in the middle of his sentence and say Hareini Nazir, period. He said Hareini Nazir min agrogos. And there's no such thing as Nazirus min agrogos. Therefore, says Rabbi Yehuda, you have to reinterpret Beit Shammai. Af kisha amru Beit Shammai, that there is a chalos iser when he says already nazir min, etc. Lo amru ella bi omer harei alai karma. Okay, now what does this mean? He didn't say the words harei alai karma. Give me a break. I mean, that's not in the Mishnah. But rather what it means is, and I'm basing myself here on the Rush, it means we ask him and we interrogate him, what did you have in mind? And what does he offer as an answer? He says, what I meant to accept upon myself was harei hein olai karma. So even though he did not use the lashon of a neder, which is called harei olai, but rather he used the lashon of a nazir, and he said already nazir min agrogos v'advela. Nevertheless, he explained to us what he meant. We accept and believe what he says, that what he had in mind was to prohibit te'enim or grogros or what do you call it, te'enim, as what? As a neder, as a karma, which is called hatfasa b'karma. So that's what Beit Shammai, mean when they say Nazir. Beit Shammai never meant to say that he's a Nazir. Beit Shammai meant to say that just like a Nazir is enjoined from drinking wine, so too through this neder, which he interprets on our behalf, the te'enim become asurim olav be'isur neder. And this, my friends, fits in so beautifully with that shita, which I think we mentioned in the Rishonim, that Nazir is a neder, as opposed to many other Rishonim who take the position that Nazir is not a neder at all. A neder is an Isur Chefta. This is not an Isur Chefta, it's Kedusha Sagavra. In any event, just to summarize Rabbi Yehuda, even according to Beit Shammai, there's no chalos nazirus in this case. He never had in mind to accept upon himself nazirus. Now Tosfos asks the following question. We have a principle called Dvarim Shebelev Einam Dvarim. It's very nice and fine that he interprets what he had in mind. But at the end of the day, we need a Kabbalas Neder, what's called Afloas Peh, and everything depends upon what came out of his mouth. In Nidarim, which makes Nidarim very unique, it is the Hotzas Peh that generates the Isur Neder. And what did he say? He said, already knows him in Agrogos. Now he's coming along and he's interpreting it, Harei alai carbon. Well, that's Dvarim Shebelev. And Dvarim Shebelev, lo avi Dvarim. So Tosfos says that when he said Nazim in Agrogos Vadvela, we can't take him literally, that he means to take Nazirus from those food items, because there's no Nazirus on Grogos and Tvela, but rather we have to reinterpret the mashmos of his Dvarim. He's going to only clinch it for us, but once we see through his kavana, when he answers our interrogations, we're going to put that into his lashon, and therefore it's not Dvarim Shebelev. The Gemara now says that in the Mishnah of Haredi Nazir and Agrogos and Advel Beit Shammai or Nazir, Famai, we're going now according to what's called the Tanakama of Beit Shammai before Rabbi Yehuda, who understood that according to Beit Shammai, he is a Nazir. So the Gemara says, Hamai, let's read the Parsha of Nazir in Parshas Nasa. And it says, Mikol asher yosem migefen hayayin. Omar Achmona, that's what the Torah says. Nazirus means that he's poresh. He has to separate himself from products of the vine, but not from Grogos and Tvela. So why should there be a chalos Nazirus? And again, this is all within the framework of the Tanakama's understanding of Beit Shammai, as opposed to Rabbi Yehuda, who says that even Beit Shammai holds there's no Nazirus. And the Gemara answers, now we're going to activate the famous principle of Rabbi Meir in Masechet Erchin Daf Hey. Beit Shammai Savri Leike Rabbi Meir Diyomer Ein Adam Motzi Dvarav Levatola. When a person accepts upon himself something that cannot be, according to Allah. And the case in Erchin is where instead of saying erech of a mature person alive, he says erech of a newborn baby who's less than 12 months alive. And that's an erech in Daf Hey. The Torah says at the end of Sefer Vayikra that if a person says erech alai, his own erech he accepts upon himself, or erech ploni alai, he's chayav to give a certain sheer kotzuv. He has to pay to Bedek HaBayis, so the Beis HaMikdash, a certain specific sheer, and the Torah goes through, the enumerates it all in all. But here, he said, Dmei kli ze alai, Dmei ploni pachos mi ben chodesh alai. And in truth, there's no such thing as erchin on a kli. Right? So, for example, if a person says erech behemazu alai, it's not chal. And yet, Rabbi Meir says that despite the fact that he took a pledge of an erchi alai, of dmei kli ze alai, or dmei ploni pachos mi ben chodesh alai, he has to pay up the value of the kli, or the value of that young infant, and he has to pay up to Bedek HaBayis. And on this we have a machlokas between Rabbi Meir and the Chachamim. If a person says erech kli alai or erech ploni pachos mi ben chodesh alai, and we'll take the shita of Rabbi Meir. Rabbi Meir's shita is that even though there's no erchen on a kli, even though there's no erchen on a pachos mi ben chodesh, nevertheless he has to pay dmei kli. He has to pay the value of the kli, or the value of pachos mi ben chodesh, because a person knows that this is not erchen, and ein odom motzi dvar mipiv. So if he says something that he knows is meaningless, then we have to understand what did he mean, and we're going to say he meant to be mischayev in dmei kli, etc. And that's the sheet of Rabbi Meir based on the principle ein odom motzi dvar b'atola mipiv. The Chacham disagree. The Chacham are of the opinion that there's no such thing as erech kli alai or erech ploni pachos mi ben chodesh alai. We're not going to reinterpret him as if he said dmei kli. He said erech kli, and he was activating the parsha of erchen, and the Torah has no erech kotzuv in the Torah, neither for a kli nor for a pachos mi ben yud beis chodesh. And therefore, it's dvarim b'telim. Says Beit Shammai, according to the Tanna Kamma of Mishnah, Ein Adam, he holds like Rabbi Meir. And when a person says Hareini Nazir min agrogos, he understands very well that this is not Nazirus. Maybe he made a little bit of a mistake, but when he says Hareini Nazir min agrogos, he means to accept upon himself Nazirus. He added a little bit too much when he added Grogos, but he did say Hareini Nazir, indicating clearly that he wants to be a Nazir, and Ein Odom Motzi Dvar Mipiv. So when we're going to discount the addition, Kolamosim Korea, of Grogos, and we're going to just stop at the words Hareini Nazir, because those words are meaningful, and in those words, likt, we say, in Hebrew we say munach, we have within those words kavana, that he wants to prohibit upon himself the Yisrei Nazir, and even though he wants to add Grogos into the picture, into the pot, that we're not going to consider, and all this is to justify Beit Shammai's position that the Nazirus is chal, because ein odom motzi dvarav levatola mipiv. Now I have here a note in the name of the Shita Mekubetzes, and he writes that on Omrim Sha'adam Yodea She'ein Nazirus Begrogos. In other words, if we're activating Rabbi Meir in Erchin, Rabbi Meir is based on the fact that a person knows that literally Erchin in a Kli is not valid, and therefore, we're going to reinterpret that he means Shovi, or the value of the Kli. Here too, says the Shita Mekubetzes, according to Rabbi Meir, and Beit Shammai is standing on the shoulders of Rabbi Meir, Adam Yodea She'ein Nazirus Begrogos. And therefore his kavana of Hareini Nazir must be L'Shem Nazirus Miyayin. Okay, now that we've understood Beit Shammai, and we have Rabbi Meir of Eino the Motzi Dvarav Levatol Mipiv, what are we going to do with Beis Hillel? And the Gemara says that for this we have to learn a sugya Masechet Tmura, Adaf Chav Hey. What happens? A person points to an animal, what we call a behema schulin, and he declares, Tehei behema zu tmuras ola utmuras shlomim. Now notice, he had two different statements. One is tmuras ola, and the other is tmuras shlomim. So what's the status of this animal? Because the Torah says in the Parsha of Tmura, Hu Tmuras Kodesh. So the Mishnah in Tmura establishes that these two Kedushos, one of Ola and the other of Shlomim, Sosro Zuesu. They are mutually exclusive. So if there'll be a Chalos Kedushas Ola, then this animal does not lend itself to Kedushas Shlomim. If on the other hand it'll be a Kedushas Shlomim, it cannot be Kedushas Ola. So here we have Machlokas Tanoim, what to do in this case of a person who says about one animal, Tehei Tmuras Ola Utmuras Shlomim. According to Rabbi Yossi, Bigmar Dvarav Adam Nitfas. What does this mean? That we look at both statements that came out of his mouth, not just his initial statement, which is going to be the sheet of Rabbi Meir, that everything depends on psicha or tchilas dvarav, but af bigmar dvarav adam nitfas. And what this means is that he wants to impose upon a behemas chulin both Tmuras Ola, which was Lashon or Rishon, and Tmuras Shlomim, which was Sof Dvarav, Gemar Dvarav. So we can't take both of them, and therefore the animal is Posel of Mizbeach. It has a din of Teiroi Achetistoyev. We let the animal roam around in the grazing area until he swallows a nail and he punctures his internal organs, and then we sell a Psulei HaMukdashim, half its money goes for an Ola, and the other half for Shlomim. That's the Shita of Rabbi Yossi. Rabbi Meir, on the other hand, says, Be'tfos Lashon Rishon, and therefore the animal now has Kedushas Ola exclusively. If we apply Rabbi Yossi to our Mishnah, then what does it mean? The man says, Min HaGrogos u'min HaDvela. So the Gemara says, Hai neder upischo imahu. This is a neder that has a built-in Pesach. What is a Pesach? As you know, a Pesach means that the Chacham finds something in the neder that's objectionable. For example, he didn't realize that his father was amongst the group that he prohibited with the neder. That's called a Pesach. And the Chacham will be matir and neder with a Pesach. The Gemara now uses that model of Hatoras Chacham Ayidei Pesach as it applies here to the Sof or Gemar Dvarav. What did he say? Gemar Dvarav. Tevutzim lagid shalom aleichem. They spoke Kvutzah Shel Minyan Masechet in Canada. Okay. Again, to reiterate the Gemara's language here. Hi neder upischo imohu. On the one hand, he took a neder and he said, already Nazir. But immediately after that, we have to be serious about Gemar Dvarav, according to Rabbi Yossi, and Beit Shammai accepts, and Beis Hillel except Rabbi Yossi, he said, Min HaGrogos. Once he says Min HaGrogos, he really indicates that when he said already Nazir, he didn't mean to accept upon himself Nazirus, because there's no Nazirus min HaGrogos. And since B'Gemar Dvarav Adam Nitfas, we now have a Gilui we now have a, so to speak, a revelation that we reveal that when he said Hareini Nazir, even though he may have indicated that he wants to be a Nazir from Yayin, but B'Gmar Dvarav, he certainly indicates that he's not interested in Nazirus min Yayin. So the Gemara is so convinced by the logic of Beis Hillel, it's so compelling that the Gemara now turns around a full 180 degrees. Ubeis Shammai nami neder pischo imuhu. Isn't it true that even Beit Shammai would have to admit that there's a Pesach to the neder with Gemar Dvarav? The Gemara right now is not willing to pin the tail on the donkey, so to speak, meaning pin Beit Shammai with the sheet of Rabbi Meir, who says Tfos Lashon Rishon. The Gemara has vested interest based on the Sugya Tvura in squaring off Beit Shammai, even with the sheet of Rabbi Yossi, that Af B'Gmar Dvarav Adam Nitfas. And if that be the case, when he finishes and says Ben Agrogos, he is so ser Dvarav HaKodmin, he absolutely contradicts what he said at the beginning of Hareini Nazir. And the Gemara thinks now that even if Beit Shammai embraced the Shita Rabbi Meir that we mentioned earlier from the Sugyan Erchin, we have to keep in mind there are two Rabbi Meirs here. I mean, it's the same Rabbi Meir, but there's Rabbi Meir in Tmura and there's Rabbi Meir in Erchin. We have already put Rabbi Meir in Erchin on the side, on the back burners. That means Tfos Lashon Rishon. Forget about Tfos Lashon Rishon. We're going to go straight away with Rabbi Yossi, Af B'Gmar Dvarav Adam Nim. But wait a minute, what about the other Rabbi Meir? The other Rabbi Meir said, Ein other Motzi Dvarav B'Teilim Mipiv. And if we go with that, then we're going to have to say that Hareini Nazir meant that he really wants to accept Nazir. So the Gemara says, no, I'm not going to go down that road. I'm going to say B'Gmar Dvarav Adam Nitfas. And therefore, when he says Minag Rogros, he indicates clearly that when he said Hareini Nazir, he did not have in mind to be Makabel Nazirus. And therefore, it's Dvarim B'Teilim. So the premise of the Gemara now is that even if I hold like Rabbi Meir as a general rule that Eino the Motzi Dvarim B'Teilim Mipiv, there are exceptions to that rule. If a person says something, enunciates something that's clearly Dvarim B'Teilim, and he indicates clearly that all he has in mind is Grogros and not Nazirus Min Hayayin, then even Rabbi Meir is going to have to step aside and say it's Dvarim B'Teilim. Nein, says the Gemara. Ela Beit Shammai Savri Lak Rabbi Meir Diomer Eino Lemotzi Dvarim B'Teilim Mipiv. And what does this mean? That we're not going to interpret that he really, when he said Hareini Nazir, he meant to be a Nazir but a Grogros. And therefore he's soser his Tchilas Dvara. But rather we're going to do what I call, again, this is Berzon speaking, and only Berzon, don't blame anybody else, Palginon Dibura. Palginon Dibura is a principle that works and operates in Eidus, and here, we apply it here to Beit Shammai, based on Rabbi Meir, Eino the Motzi Dvarav Mipiv, Levatol Mipiv, and we're going to split his words into two, part of which we'll accept and part of which we'll reject. Kevan the Hareini Nazir. Immediately when he says, I'm a Nazir, again, Rabbosai, what is Nazirus? When a person accepts upon his Nazirus, what is it in essence? A 5-letter word that starts with a kuf and ends with hey. Hello, anybody home? Okay. I'll give the answer because we're on Zoom. Kedusha. Nazirus is Kedusha Sagavra. The Torah says so. Kadosh Yeh. Says Beit Shammai, once he says Hareini Nazir, we don't have to wait a split second, not even a fraction of a second. He's already sanctified with Kedushas Nazirus. Just like if a person says Harei Zeh Hegdesh, immediately it becomes Hegdesh. Is therefore, Keva the Omar Hareini Nazir, immediately Avilei Nazir. V'chika Omar, now he finishes, he says, Min Agrogos, Umin Adfela. which indicates that he's not interested in Kabbalah's Nazirus. Lishtaluye hudakasi. He had a change in heart. That's how far we're going to split the first part of a sentence. Already knows it with the second. He wants to say, you know what? I don't want to be Kadosh B'Kedushas Nazirus. I just want to abstain from eating figs and dates. So that's called Lishtule Hudakasi. He's coming to be shoal on his neder. He, like anyone who comes in front of a chacham to be shoal on his neder, he says, I have charata. I really regret and remorse that I ever took that neder. And here also, even though Toch Kedei Dibur of his Kabbalah's Nazirus, he indicates his charata, when his Hegdesh, Beit Shammai holds there's no such thing as charata. Once the Hegdesh is chal in the chefta, charata doesn't operate. In fact, even if Toch Kedei Dibur, there's a chacham there, he would ask for she'ela, the chacham, according to Beit Shammai, could not be matter his neder, his Hegdesh. And moreover, Beit Shammai are of the opinion that even if a person mistakenly said Areza Hegdesh, that's called Hegdesh Tos, even then the Hegdesh would be chal. Beit Shammai l'tamayu, Beit Shammai are very consistent. The Amri ein she'elu behegdesh. If a person was magdish an object, once the kedusha is chal in the chefza, he cannot be shoel to a chacham to be matter the hegdesh. And Beit Shammai who hold ein she'elu behegdesh, when we learned in a Mishnah later on that Beit Shammai holds Hegdesh is chal afilu b'tos, even with a mistake. So certainly She'ela b'Hegdesh can't work. Because what's the upshot and the goal and the agenda of She'ela b'Hegdesh? To establish that he made it tos. Well, guess what? Beit Shammai hold Hegdesh b'tos is chal. And this is the power of the peh, of Haflas peh of Hegdesh, that it can generate Kedusha in such a way that the peh itself generates Kedusha, even if he had a toes, and therefore he cannot be shoel on Hegdesh. And by virtue of the equation between Nazirus, in which the Gavra of a Nazir is sanctified with Kedushas Hegdesh, as the Pasuk says, Kadosh Yiyah, and to the same extent that Ein She'ela b'Hegdesh, Ein She'ela b'Nazirus. To summarize, the Gemara understands that Beit Shammai holds that there is Nazirus. Again, this is not Rabbi Yehuda's interpretation of Beit Shammai. It's the Tanakhama's interpretation of Beit Shammai. The Nazirus is chal. How could the Nazirus be chal? It's impossible. He said he wants to be a Nazir from Grogos. And the answer is the moment that he uttered the word, he whispered the word, Haredi Nazir, he becomes Kadosh B'Kedushas Nazir, and he can't be shoel on his Nazirus. And then we interpret that when he says afterwards, Minagrogos, what he means to be shoel, and that's the Gemara's language, is ishtaluye, it's shule hudakaasi, and that he can't do because Beis Shammai l'shitosim hold that there's no she'el on hegdesh, even tokadei dibur, you can't regret and rescind your hegdesh. And so too here, as soon as he's makabel nazirus with the two words already nazir, what he says afterwards, even tokadei dibur, he says minagrogos, we don't consider that at all. That's like being shoel on hegdesh, and Beit Shammai holds there's no she'el on hegdesh. But again, we have to emphasize, and I can't leave this point behind, that if not for Rabbi Meir's sheet of Edo de Motzi Dvar of Levatola, we never would have come up with this. Because Rabbi Meir is the one who gives us license to split his statement into two parts. And here I want to add something in the name of the Shari Yosha. He says the following. What we see from this sugya is that whenever there is no possibility, halachically, of being shoel to a chacham, then even chazara toch kedei dibur doesn't work. And that's a pel of a chiddush, because usually we say chazara toch kedei dibur means it's as if he never said it. And these are halachas in Eidus and in Shvua and all over the show. But here, we're going to say that chazara toch kedei dibur doesn't operate. Why? Because she'elas chacham doesn't operate. That's the power of the aflas peh to generate kedushas hachefetz, or in this case of Nazir, kedushas hagav. Ubeis Hillel. Once again, Beis Hillel were the ones who say that the Naziris is not Chal. The Gemara says, Savri law kirabi Shimon. This is not. So now we're going to learn a Mishnah in Menachos. Now this Mishnah in Menachos is going to occupy our mind for the balance of Daf Tes, meaning Tes Amid Beis. But here it is on Daf Tes Amid Aleph. And the Gemara quotes Rabbi Shimon from the Mishnah in Menachos. A man says, Harei olai mincha min ha'sa'orim. Wait a minute. Is there such a thing as a mincha min ha'sa'orim? Again, if we weren't on Zoom, I would challenge you. Okay? I'm just hoping that you hear me. Anyway, is there mincha min ha'sa'orim? The answer is yes, and the answer is no. If you're talking about a sota, if you're talking about the Omer and the Minchas HaOmer that was brought once a year in the Beis HaMikdash, the answer is yes. There is such a thing as a carbon mincha. That entity exists, min ha'siorim. All the other menachos, including a nedava, when a person takes upon himself voluntarily through a pledge to bring a carbon mincha, it's min ha'chita. And this man took upon himself voluntarily to bring a mincha min ha'sa'orim. The Tanakama says, it's not quoted here, it's in the Mishnah in Menachos, he has to bring mincha min ha'chitin. Reb Shimon Poter. Reb Shimon says, what kind of nidava? A person takes a nidava, harei olai mincha min ha'sa'orim, lo hisnadev kiderech ha'misnavim. This is not a nidava. There's no such thing as a nidava mincha min ha'sa'orim. We do have a precedent for mincha min ha'sa'orim, but not in the case of a nidava. There's no such thing as a nidava of a mincha min ha'sa'orim. Every nidava of mincha has to be min ha'chitim. And Beis Hillel makes the following leap of faith, the following analogy. To the same extent that Rabbi Shimon says that ein adam misnadev derech ha'misnadvim, and therefore his nidava is not chal and he's potur, so too in the case of Hareni Nazir, when he adds minagrogos, we're not going to say, well, at the beginning he said Hareni Nazir and he wanted to be makabel Nazirus. No. We're going to assume, as Rabbi Shimon assumes, in the case of Harei olai ola min ha'siorim, we're not going to stop him midway and say, well, Harei olai ola, stop. And he means min hachitim. That's okay for the Tanakama. That's okay for Beit Shammai. That's not okay for Rabbi Shimon and not okay for Beis Hillel. Because both Beis Hillel standing on the shoulders of Rabbi Shimon and Rabbi Shimon in the original, Ein Adam Misnadev Ela Kederech HaMisnadvim. Kederech HaMisnadvim means Harei olai mincha min hachitim. It means Hareni Nazir min hayayin. But when he says Hareni Nazir min hagrogos, we're not going to take the beginning of his words, Hareni Nazir, just like Rabbi Shimon refuses to take the beginning of the words Harei olai mincha and say, well, he accepted upon himself Nazirus, and then he changed his mind and he wants to be Chozerbo and the whole 9 yards. Forget about all that. We say that L'chatchila from the get-go his kavana was to accept upon himself what kind of Nazirus? Nazirus min hagrogos, and such Nazirus doesn't exist. And here we have to mention, oh boy, what time is it? One second. It says here 6 minutes to 2. Can somebody just remind me how many minutes do we have here in Canada? I just one second. We said it was 55 minutes, correct? So that should be 1:15. Okay, so if I'm not mistaken, we have 21 minutes. Okay. So again, I'm going to try my best. We're almost about to turn to Tes Amid Beis, but first I have to mention Tosas Kasha.
But now you're in trouble because you forced us to unmute. Okay.
Oh, okay. All right. So now Tosas says the following. The Gemara needs to explain Beis Hillel based on the principle of Reb Shimon. Farvas. After all, let's explain Beis Hillel as saying that Yesh She'elu Behekdesh. And therefore, even though a person when he adds the words minagrogros, is now changing his tune and indicating that he doesn't want the Hegdesh. And in the case of Nazir, he doesn't want the Nazirus, but it's Beis Hillel sheet against Beit Shammai that Hegdesh B'tos ain't a Hegdesh, and you can be Shoel on Hegdesh. So now that he indicates that he doesn't want what he originally wants, and he's Choser, but he regrets it, then that should be ample explanation to justify why Beis Hillel says he's not a Nazir. Why does he have to introduce Rabbi Shimon? Why not stay local and argue against Beit Shammai, who hold that Yesh Hegdesh B'tos and Ein Sheil Al Hegdesh? Beis Hillel never bought into them. That's the Kasha of Tosfos. So Tosfos answers that the Gemara is looking for an explanation of Beis Hillel that would be acceptable even according to Rabbi Yehuda in our Mishnah, who holds that both Beis Hillel and Beit Shammai agreed unanimously that there's no Iser Nazirus here. That was Rabbi Yehuda's take on Beit Shammai. The Beit Shammai only introduced an Iser Neder. And the Gemara now wants to completely circumvent the whole issue of Hegdesh, meaning Nazirus and the Kedusha Gabra that we spoke about, because Beit Shammai in the worst case scenario was only talking about a Neder, not Nazirus. Okay, Rabbosai, at this point, we're turning to Daf Tes Amid Beis. And the Gemara says the following. Our Mishnah is against Rabbi Nassan. Masnisin de Loki Aitana Disanya. We learn Rabbi Nassan Omer. What's the machlok stream Beis Hillel Beit Shammai? Beit Shammai Omrim Nadur V'Nazir. Beit Shammai, according to Rabbi Nassan's transmission, were of the opinion that the situation here is Nadur V'Nazir. What does that mean, Nadur V'Nazir? Let's call a spade a spade. It's either a neder, which means that he's accepting upon himself that his grogro should be like a carbon, or it's a nazir and he's accepting nazirus. The answer is the following. According to Rabbi Nassan, we're going to ask him what he had in mind. Pile Plum, Rabbi Nassan, again in Beit Shammai. If he tells us that what he had in mind was to generate a status of grogos kikarbon, then nadu, then it's chal b'toras neder. If on the other hand he says that, you know what, I said haredi nazir, I didn't say that the tvela and the grogos should be like a carbon, is then he's a nazir. So basically, the way we're reading this Mishnah, I mean, it's a Bryce actually of Rabbi Nassan, is Nadur o Nazir. And I emphasize that because there are other Rishonim who want to say that according to Beit Shammai, both will be Chal. But in any event, let's leave that out. Beis Hillel Omrim, Nadur v'yeino Nazir. Beis Hillel says that we don't have another possibility here. There's only one possibility. And he is accepting upon himself that grogro should be asur bin neder. Now, let's make a quick calculation here, Rabbosai. Rabbi Nassan does not fit into our Mishnah at all. That's what the Gemara says, Masnisin deloki aitana. Our Mishnah is against Rabbi Nassan. Why? Let's go through the two interpretations of our Mishnah. We have the Tanakama and we have Rabbi Yehuda. Let's see how it works out. According to the Tanakama and Rabbi Yehuda, Beis Hillel holds that nothing is chal. It doesn't register at all. It's dvarim b'telim. Rabbi Nassan says that according to Beis Hillel, it's chal as a neder, and the grogros are now asur b'neder. And the truth is that even according to Beit Shammai, the way Beit Shammai is presented in our Mishnah is not the way Rabbi Nosson has Beit Shammai. Because according to our interpretation of Beit Shammai, let's say according to the Tanakam of Beit Shammai holds he's a Nazir. Rabbi Yehuda holds it's only a Neder. But nobody says, like Rabbi Nosson, that according to Beit Shammai, he is a Nazir. So therefore, Gam B'das Beit Shammai, Choluk Rabbi Nosson ala Tanoim shebe Mishnah, Shalidiri Tanakama lefi Beit Shammai Chalal of this year's v'lo neder. There's no possibility of a neder. Whereas Rabbi Nosson says, according to Beit Shammai, the first interpretation will give, if he accepts it, if he himself accepts it, is that it's a neder. According to Rabbi Yehuda, Beit Shammai hold that there's only a chalosi sur neder, but no naziris. So again, it's one extreme or the other in Beit Shammai. So again, according to Beis Hillel, there's nothing at all chal in our Mishnah. That's against Rabbi Nosson. And according to Beit Shammai, once again, you have the Tanakhama's interpretation of Beit Shammai, and you have Rabbi Nosson, and you have Rabbi Yehuda's interpretation of Beit Shammai. According to Tanakhama Beit Shammai, he's a Nazir. According to Rabbi Yehuda's interpretation of Beit Shammai, he's accepting a neder. Comes along Rabbi Nosson, and he says, no, Beit Shammai have the flexibility, oh neder, oh nazirus, depending on his response to our interrogation. And now the Gemara brings an explanation of the machlokas between Beit Shammai and Beis Hillel according to Rabbi Nosson. Beit Shammai savri la Rabbi Meir, which means eino the motzi dvarav b'teil mipir. Therefore, even if he says something that has no meaning in and of itself, we're going to try to clarify what his intention is. And he's going to tell us whether he wanted to be a Nazir, or let's start it the other way around, whether he wanted to accept a neder on Grogros, or he wanted to become a Nazir. And again, we're going to have to introduce Rabbi Yehuda's shita here about Beit Shammai, because Rabbi Yehuda says, according to Beit Shammai, he is Asur b'neder. So Beit Shammai, according to Rabbi Meir, is a combination of both Rabbi Meir and Rabbi Yehuda. In the light of Rabbi Meir, we're going to say he accepted upon himself Nazirs, and we'll try to clarify that and confirm that. In the light of Rabbi Yehuda's interpretation by Shammai, we're going to assume that he may have meant a neder, and he'll clarify that. So basically, Rabbi Nosson is a combo of both Rabbi Meir and Rabbi Yehuda. What about Beis Hillel? Beis Hillel, Savri Lo, Ki Rabbi Yossi. And Rabbi Yossi is Bigmar Dvarav, Adam Nitfas. Forget about the beginning of what he said, already Nazir. He now clarifies what he meant. And the word Nazir, he means an Isur Neder, Mina Grogros, and therefore, according to Beis Hillel, he will be Asur on, there'll be an Isur Neder on the Grogros. Lishnach Rinamrele, another interpretation of Rabbi Nosson, another transmission of Rabbi Nosson. And this is a different brisa that quotes Rabbi Nosson. Rabbi Nosson Omer, Beit Shammai Omrim, according to Rabbi Nosson's version of Beit Shammai, if he says explicitly that he meant to take a neder on the Grogros, Nadu. V'eno Nazir. That means that there's no chalos nazirus. In that sense, Rabbi Nosson is very close to Rabbi Yehuda's interpretation of Beit Shammai, who Beis Hillel Omer lo Nadu lo Nazir. It's nothing, it's not chal. So basically now, according to the second transmission of Rabbi Nosson, it comes out that Rabbi Nosson is arguing with the Tanakhama of our Mishnah, because according to the Tanakhama of our Mishnah, Beit Shammai holds there is a chalos nazirus, whereas according to Rabbi Nosson's version of Beit Shammai, it's nadur v'eno nazir. Now the Gemara wants to explain the machlokas according to the second version of Rabbi Nosson. Beit Shammai ki Rabbi Yehuda. Beit Shammai holds the way Rabbi Yehuda interpreted Beit Shammai, that he accepted upon himself a neder, and therefore the te'edim all on are a carbon. Beis Hillel ki Rabbi Shimon, and Beis Hillel who says that nothing is chal, they hold like Rabbi Shimon, that he was not misnadev kederech hamisnadvim, and therefore it's not chal, like the case of a person who says, I want to bring voluntarily a mincha min hasiorim. Tanan Hos. Let's go back to the Mishnah Menachos that we mentioned earlier. Ha'omer harei olai mincha lahavi min hasaorim yavi min achitim, according to Tanakama, he has to bring a mincha min achita, because there's no such thing as a minchas nedava from anything but chita. Or if he says harei alai lavi mincha min akemach, kemach is something that wasn't refined. In Hebrew, it's called eno minupeh. And there's no such thing as a mincha of eno minupeh, because a mincha by definition has to be misoles, it's got to be refined, is yafi min asoles. If he says shalom, b'shemen ulevona, I want to bring a mincha, but it should not be with the additional ingredients of shemen and levona. There's no such thing as a minchas nedava without shemen ulevona. You have the eno b'shemen ulevona. If he says chatzi isaron lemincha, and there's no such thing as a mincha of nedava that comes with less than a full isaron, yavi isaron shalem. And if he says isaron umechza yavi shnayim, because there's no such thing as a mechza of an isaron, and therefore when he adds another mechza, he needs to accept another korban mincha. All this is according to Tanakama, and the Tanakama is going to take him very seriously. Rabbi Shimon, however, disagrees. Poter shalo hisnadev kederech hamisnad. So the Gemara now asks, Man Tana, which Tana holds like the Mishnah in Menachos? Who is such a Tana? Can we identify him by name? The Tanakama of the Mishnah Menachos who disagrees with Rav Shimon and forces him to bring a mincha min achitim, even though he said harei alai mincha min hasaor. Amar Chizkiya, v'machlokes shnuya, and Beit Shammai. That Tanakama of the Mishnah in Menachos can only be squared off with Beit Shammai in our Mishnah here, but can never be reconciled with Beis Hillel. So the Gemara tries to explain Chizkiya. How does Chizkiya know that the Tanakam of the Mishnah in Menachos accepts Beit Shammai? Lav Amri Beit Shammai. Didn't Beit Shammai say Ki Yomi min hagrogus min hatvela min Nazir? In other words, Beit Shammai stood on the shoulders of Rabbi Meir. That ain't on the Motzi Dvarav V'Levatol Mipib. And therefore, when he says already Nazir, we understand that he wants to accept Nazirus. Is Hachinami, even though he's saying something that's absolutely ridiculous. It's Dvar B'Telim. He says Harei alai mincha min hasaorim ki omer la mevi min achitim ein other motzi tvar l'atola mipiv. That's the shita of whom? Of Chizkiya. Rabbi Yochanan Omar, no. Afilu tema divrei hakol. I can square off Beis Hillel with the Tanakama in Masechet Menachos. And why is that? The Omer, when a person, after he took his neder, he says the following: Ilu ayisi odeshe nodrim kach. I made a good, honest to goodness mistake. I thought that since you could bring a mincha min hasaorim in various cases, like minchas haomer or minchas sota, therefore I jumped the gun and came to the conclusion that even in the case of a minchas nedava, you could bring a minchas nedava from what? From siorim. Had I known that I was making a big mistake, then lo nadarti kach alakach. I wouldn't have said harei olai korban mincha min what? Min hasiorim. I would have said harei olai korban mincha min achidim. And therefore, says Rabbi Yochanan, I can square Beis Hillel off with the Mishnah, the Tanakama, the Mishnah, and I'm going to use the premise of Ilu Ayisi Odeya. However, although he made an honest to goodness mistake when he thought that he could bring a nedava of an ola min hasiorim, because there is such an entity in halacha of a minchas. I'm sorry, did I say ola? I meant to say mincha. Sorry, there is such an entity as an ola min hasiorim. But in the case of Nazirus, there's no such thing in the entire universe. There's no such thing as Nazirus min agrogos and Vela, and therefore Beis Hillel hold that the Nazirus is not chal. He can't say, well, I made a mistake, I didn't know. That's not going to hold water. Omar Chizkiya now says, what happens if a person takes a neder of harei olai lahavi mincha min adashim? Now adashim is a hefta that's completely mufka from kedushas mincha. You can never have a mincha on adashim. Even though we love chumus, Lo shanu, Ela she'omar min asiyorim, aval omar min adashim lo ma'asim lo klum. He doesn't bring a mincha at all. When the mincha is nitfas in siorin, at least in those cases that we mentioned. So now, if he takes harei alai min hasaorim, mincha min hasaorim, it's chal. And we're going to say that he really wanted to accept upon himself a mincha, kill chasam, but he made a mistake, and it was an honest to goodness error, and he thought that you could bring a mincha from siorim. But in a case where a person takes a neder min adashim, a mincha min adashim is a non-entity, it's a non-starter, it's a chefta that's completely mufka from mincha. So the Gemara asks the following objection to Chizkiah. Michdi, Chizkiah kiman muki lo masnisen. Chizkiah was the one who said that the Mishnah Menachos is kibeit Shammai. That means that that means that according to Beit Shammai, we understand why if he says harei alai mincha min hasiorin it's chal, because we hold like Beit Shammai. So the Tana of the Mishnah Menachos holds like Beit Shammai. Well, Beit Shammai, the one who said that if a person takes a Nazirus min hagrogros, then he's a Nazir. Ha-adashim gabi mincha kigrogos gabi Nazir. What's the difference between adashim, which are mufka from kedushas mincha, and grogos, which are mufka from kedushas Nazir? Uka amrei Beit Shammai. Havi Nazir? Beit Shammai say that even though he mentioned Grogos, he's a Nazir? How could that be? Min Adashim, it's not Chal. And the Gemara answers, Hodabei Chizkiah. Chizkiah rescinded his original position. The Gemara says, V'mai Hodabei. What forced Chizkiah to remove his position, his original position? Why was he Chozero? He could have explained the Mishnah Menachos like Beit Shammai. And he could have said that the din in the Mishnah is a case where he says, harei alai mincha min adashim, and he's chayiv in a mincha min achitim. Why? Because adashim, with regard to a mincha, it's the same status as grogos regarding Nazir. Amar Rava Masnisin Kashi was medayik in the lashon of the Mishnah. What was the lashon of the Mishnah? My iri detani min hasaorim. Why did the Mishnah have to tell me a lesser chiddush? It could have told me a bigger chiddush. Listening min adashim. Let Beit Shammai tell me, because Beit Shammai equates grogros with adashim, that equation. So it would have been a bigger chiddush if he would have told me that even if he says harei alai mincha misaorin, and saorin is a hefta that's mufka from kedushas mincha, nevertheless it's chal. Ella, therefore, savar Chizkiah kikamri Beit Shammai hasam ki Rabbi Yehuda. Chizkiah says in his final conclusion that when he mentioned Beit Shammai of Haredi Nazim and Agrogros, there's an Isa that's Chal, he meant not an Isa Nazirus, but rather he held Ki Rabbi Yehuda that we're talking about an Isa Neder, a carbon, in which case he says that he wanted to aser himself vis-a-vis the grogos with a carbon, and the Mishnah Menachos says Chizkiah that reflects the Shita Beit Shammai, but only according to Rabbi Yehuda's Shita, who says that we can say that he's a Nazir, that when he says Nazir and a grogos, he means that there's going to be a chalos neder, not a chalos nazirus, because grogos is mufka from kedushas nazirus. From Yochanan Amar, he holds that according to Tanakama, the Mishnah Menachos, afilu min hadashim. Even in a case where a person takes a neder of a mincha min adashim, it's chal. So the Gemara says, how could that be? V'ha Rabbi Yochanan huti Omar. Rabbi Yochanan said in the Mishnah of Menachos, according to Beis Hillel, that he has to bring a minchas chitim. It's only the Omer if he says ta'isi, if he says I made a mistake. But ilu ha'isi odea she'ein nodrin kach lo nadarti kach elakach, I would have taken a neder to bring a minchas not a mincha min adashim. So now the Gemara has a problem here. How could it be that Rabbi Yochanan is the one who says that you could be makabel on yourself a chiyuv of an ola nidava min adashim, when Rabbi Yochanan himself says that he has to come along and he has to say, I made a mistake. Well, he could have made a mistake in minchas siorim, but he could never make a mistake in adashim because there is a precedent for a mincha min hasiorim. And the Gemara answers, lidvar of Chizkiah kamar. This is not what Rabbi Yochanan meant for his own shita. He was saying that according to Chizkiah, who says that the Mishnah is like Beit Shammai, And that's before Chizkiah rescinded his original position. And then Chizkiah went ahead and he was choser bo, because according to Beit Shammai, it should come out that even if he was noder be'olam min adashim, he'd be chayav, which means he'd have to bring an olam min achitim. And the Mishnah seems to assume, and that's what caused Chizkiah to rescind his position, that noder min adashim is patur, and that's why the Mishnah didn't give that bigger chiddush. And therefore, Rabbi Yochanan turns to him and he says, "Ak my taima kahaderba. Why did you rescind your original position? Mishum delo katani min adashim." And you were assuming in the premise was that the Mishnah should have told me a bigger chiddush, that even adashim, that a mufka from a kedushas olas nedava, even so it's chal, and he has to bring an ola min hachitim. I'm going to tell you the opposite. Dil malomi boy kamar. On the contrary, there's less of a chiddush in the case of Adasim. Lo mi boy, I don't have to tell you, ki omer me Adashim, de maisim mincha mal. So what? Because he has to bring a mincha, mina ola, in a case of when he says, Adashim, de ikol meimar, mi heder hu, de hadar be. You could say that he decided that he doesn't want to bring in a mincha at all. And when he said Arelai mincha, he really wanted to bring a mincha. But now he changed his mind when he said min adashim, and we're going to apply the principle of tfos lashon rishon. And therefore we understand that since it's meaningless what he added min adashim, then we have to push in favor of tfos lashon rishon. Ella ki omar min hasaorim. Oh, you know what? When he said Siorim, he made a mistake and he thought there is Kedushas Ola. I'm sorry, Kedushas Mincha in Siorim. Vade de Hachi Kamar. What he meant to say was I Kacha Ke Minchas HaOmer. If this mincha that I'm promising to bring from Siorim will be Kedosha, like the mincha of a Minchas HaOmer or Ke Minchas Sota, then Tikdash Vi Lo. And if it won't become Kadosh, Lo, I don't want this neder to be chal. I don't want to bring a mincha at all, and therefore he should be potul legamre. Kamash malan. That's what the Tana's bigger chiddush is. That even in the case where he said arei alai mincha min hasaorim, nevertheless ma'isi min achitim, he still has to bring a korban mincha min achitim, because initially he indicated his ratzon, his interest in bringing a korban mincha kidina, and therefore he said arei alai mincha, and then he changed his mind. And he said, Minasa Orim, and since we apply the principle of Tfos Lashon Rishon, he's chayav to bring a mincha, as he said, B'tchilas Dvar. And this will lead us to the Mishnah Mitzvah Hashem for tomorrow of Daf Yud Amud Al. Okay, if anybody wants to stay for questions, then now's a good time.
Thank you. The cow in the door. The cow in the door.
So I'm still trying to calculate now. It's 1:18 here in Israel. It's 2:18, I mean, and we started at 1:15. Yeah, we went a few minutes over time, right? Because we said 55 minutes. Okay, I apologize for that. Trying to fit it all in. Like I always say at the end of a Daf Yomi Shir, if we had another 3 hours, we could finish it. Okay, it's okay. Thank you so much. And I wish you all a great day. So we went 3 minutes over time. 3 minutes over. Okay then.